Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have once again been swept into a familiar media storm. And as always, it's not because of scandal, misconduct, or some dramatic breach of protocol. It's because they continue to exist visibly, confidently, and independently outside a system that once defined every aspect of their lives. This time, the narrative circulating in certain corners of the press suggests that Prince William is increasingly unsettled by the Sussexes' ongoing presence on the global stage. Their travel, their invitations, their public engagement, according to unnamed insiders, are said to disrupt a carefully maintained sense of order. But when you step back and strip away the emotionally loaded language, what's left isn't chaos, it's contrast. And more importantly, it's discomfort rooted not in rules being broken, but in control being loosened. Because this story at its core is not about protocol. It's about who gets to decide what legitimacy looks like in a modern world and what happens when that decision is no longer centralized. For years now, one accusation has been repeated so often that many accept it without question, that Harry and Meghan are somehow clinging to royal status while refusing royal responsibility. But repetition does not equal truth. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle did not erase their titles. Those titles were not stripped away by Parliament. They were not revoked by royal decree. They remain legally and structurally the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. That is not branding, that is fact. Using their names, styles, or personal insignia associated with those titles is not an act of rebellion. It's not defiance. It's not some calculated provocation. It's accuracy. What truly unsettles certain observers isn't the presence of a title. It's the reality that Harry and Meghan continue to be welcomed, respected, and influential without palace oversight. Because embedded deep within royal culture is an assumption that relevance must flow through the institution and nowhere else. The moment relevance exists independently, it becomes far harder to manage. Consider their international travel. Trips to countries like Nigeria and Colombia are often dismissed with the sneering phrase pseudo-royal tours. It sounds official, but it's designed to undermine rather than explain. These visits were not coordinated by Buckingham Palace. They did not represent the British government. They carried no constitutional authority. They were invitations extended because of Harry and Meghan's work in mental health advocacy, veterans support, women's empowerment, and cross-cultural engagement. That isn't confusion over roles. That's modern influence operating exactly as it does in the 21st century. When respected figures are invited somewhere, they go. When their causes resonate, people show up. When their presence matters, doors open. No crown required. Much of the reported frustration attributed to Prince William appears to be rooted not in legality, but in optics, how things look. That distinction is critical, because optics are about perception, not principle. When Harry and Meghan meet with community leaders, engage with organisations, and draw global attention, they expose an uncomfortable truth. Royal machinery is not a prerequisite for impact. Their popularity isn't manufactured by palace briefings. Their events aren't filled by obligation. People attend because they want to. Media covers them because audiences care. Organisations collaborate because their missions align. That kind of organic engagement cannot be managed from behind palace walls, and that's precisely what makes it unsettling. A recent flashpoint illustrates this perfectly. A private letter sent to an Australian psychologist, one that included a crowned personal monogram, was suddenly framed as a provocative act, as though it was some bold challenge to royal authority. But context matters. This wasn't a public proclamation, it wasn't a command, it wasn't a political statement, it was a message of appreciation. Personal monograms are symbolic, not governmental. Reading threat into gratitude requires a level of projection that says more about the observer than the sender. And yet, here we are. Even more revealing is how language itself becomes weaponized. One word in particular, reclaim, has been seized upon after reports suggested Harry and Meghan might wish to return to Australia. That single word has been spun into evidence of entitlement. But viewed through a human lens, it tells a very different story. Australia represents an early chapter in their marriage, a time when they were warmly received before the full force of hostility descended. Wanting to return isn't about reclaiming power. It's about reclaiming positive memories, connection, and emotional safety. That distinction is rarely acknowledged, because acknowledging it would require admitting that this is not about hierarchy but about unresolved discomfort. Inside Prince William's reported circle, this language is described as problematic. But problematic for whom? For the public who largely understand nuance, or for an institution struggling to draw rigid lines in a world that no longer functions in absolutes? Because the truth is, the monarchy is changing whether it wants to or not. And Harry and Meghan embody a version of royal adjacent life that prioritizes values over obligation, service over submission. That contrast is deeply uncomfortable for those invested in preserving hierarchy at any cost. There's an unspoken assumption behind many of these criticisms that institutional clarity is fragile. But strong institutions aren't threatened by difference. They're threatened by stagnation. If the monarchy were truly confident in its relevance, Harry and Meghan's independence would not be framed as dangerous. It would be seen as proof that the system is resilient enough to withstand evolution. Instead, we see repeated briefings suggesting anxiety over one very specific idea: that the public can hold more than one truth at the same time, that people can respect the monarchy while also admiring Harry and Meghan, that loyalty no longer needs to be exclusive to be meaningful. Meghan Markle, in particular, remains a focal point of this tension. Her confidence unsettles expectations. Her visibility disrupts outdated norms. She does not shrink herself to fit protocol. She enters spaces fully, unapologetically, and on her own terms. And that autonomy is what truly rattles traditional power dynamics, because systems built on control are always unsettled by people who refuse to be diminished. Prince Harry's evolution is equally significant. He is no longer the background figure playing a predetermined role. He chose well-being over silent endurance, family over rigid tradition, transparency over enforced restraint. Stepping away did not erase him. It transformed him. And as Prince William moves closer to the throne, that contrast becomes increasingly stark. Leadership in a modern era requires confidence, emotional intelligence, and adaptability. Continually portraying one's own brother as a destabilizing force risks making the institution appear brittle rather than strong. A secure future king does not need to monitor his siblings' travel plans. What's also striking is how consistently one-sided these narratives are. We hear about frustration, about irritation, about internal anger. What we don't hear about is dialogue. We don't hear about curiosity. We don't hear about meeting change halfway. Responsibility for harmony is always placed on Harry and Meghan, never on the system that played a role in the rupture. Public confusion is often cited as justification for concern. But most people are not confused. They understand that Harry and Meghan are no longer working royals. They also understand that blood ties and marriage do not disappear with a job change. Those truths coexist effortlessly unless confusion is intentionally cultivated. At its heart, this is not a story about monograms or travel schedules. It is a story about freedom versus control, about an institution coming to terms with the reality that it no longer holds a monopoly on meaning. Harry and Meghan are not trying to replace the monarchy. They are building something alongside it, modern, flexible, and rooted in service without submission. Every claim that they've disrupted someone's peace unintentionally reveals something important. Peace that depends on others shrinking themselves is not peace. It is fragility. True stability comes from confidence, not containment. Since 2020, Harry and Meghan have been remarkably consistent. They said they wanted to contribute. They said they wanted to connect. They said they wanted to serve on their own terms. And that is exactly what they've done. If their success beyond palace walls causes discomfort within them, that is not a personal failing. It is a reckoning for an institution adjusting to relevance in a changing world. As future travel plans unfold, familiar cycles will repeat. Warm receptions, strong public interest, predictable backlash. But the outcome will remain the same. Harry and Meghan will continue living openly, speaking plainly, and proving that stepping back does not mean stepping out. The real disruption here is not to peace. It is to an outdated belief that identity, influence and purpose can be revoked by decree, and that, more than any letter or visit, is why their presence continues to resonate, no matter how often it is framed as a problem.